discuss a little bit. Maybe I think so to structure it a little bit and so to be somewhat efficient, that let's go maybe on price, supply, demand. I think we can probably start from every side because it's all interconnected. But maybe let's start with prices. So I just talked yesterday to one big project developer who's buying tier 1 modules at the moment, still at 8 cents in Europe, and so latest products. So that's where we are. So at the same time, government in China is trying somewhat to foster consolidation, getting prices up. So there was a little price uptick in silicon that we've recently seen. So the question is actually, first, how sustainable is this? Is this a trend to go? Will this have a knock-on effect actually on the later parts of the supply chain? Or is this just a small fire that will collapse soon? And with all the capacities that we still have, continue to have, prices might even continue to go down. So I don't know. So it's a big crystal ball thing, I know, but maybe everyone a system, just an assessment. I don't know what's first.
Marius?
Yeah, I can go.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen this before, right? It's every single time that China announces, or from Beijing, that they're going to curb the overproduction issue. And of course, that has a positive impact short term on, let's say, with polysilicon prices. You see price quotes going up. At the same time, you see transaction deals volumes kind of going down. And then wafer manufacturers, they hike their price quotes, but we see less transaction deal volumes happen there. And nothing really happens except for this sentiment that we need to do something about overproduction and overcapacity. And the market dynamics essentially stay the same. There's too much production, there are high inventory levels, and prices tend to go back down again. So we've seen this a couple of times. Usually it's seasonal. It's every single time before Lunar New Year, prices hike. After that, they go back down again. So, I mean, unless something drastic happens, prices are going to come back down again.
Okay.
But I mean, to add on this too, I mean, there was some number were floated concerning polysilicon prices. I mean, right now we are around about 45 RMB per kilo, plus minus, and the price which was floated was around 60. All right, 60. Yeah, I mean, it's not earth-shaking high. Yeah, I mean, hello. Yeah, so 60. Yeah, this is where we're assuming that a handful of smaller players will be bundled into one asset fund managed. I just mentioned earlier, but even 60. So what? Yeah, I mean, what do you expect? Yeah, so yes, I can only agree to what was Marius elaborating. Yeah, it is seasonal. We have seen this pattern of price development for a good number of years and for too many years. Yeah. So I wonder what is really supposed to happen. Yeah, that prices should go up. Yeah. And even if they go up, module prices are still so affordable. I don't want to say cheap. Yeah, so affordable. Yeah. So even then, why complain? Yeah. I mean, it's basically to shift, let's say, the manufacturers towards a net profit margin, put it this way. Yeah, I mean, interesting if you read at Trina Solar's annual report, the gross profit margin for modules in China is around 5%. In the US, it's beyond 30%. Now you get an idea why the US market, as small as it is so attractive for many of the Chinese colleagues. But anyway, I know, short-lived as always. Yeah,
okay.
This kind of, president is stepping in. Oh, now we have to do something, and then it will trickle down back to the former level.
Okay, Frank, I'm not sure if you can discuss that or reveal your pricing policy, but maybe the other way around. So if prices continue to go down, how you prepare for that?
I'm not sure if the price will continue to keep going down, but not too much to say about price. We just have our strategies with the pricing for the industries, and I think something more important for us is to have working together with our partners, our suppliers, to ensure that we comply with all these requirements. It's more than just the price. That's what we always say in our company. It's more than just the price. We need to also considering the sustainability for the business. That's including the future legislations. For example, Europe have its own carbon footprint that will come into place for the battery regulations, as well as other regulations on the not just to Sungrow, but also your suppliers, your supply chain network. So that's something we also take into consideration.
But how do you prepare in terms of when you look at cost and price? There's of course one way to actually counter the decrease. So how when at batteries,
what you're saying upstream price go down is we don't produce battery cells.
Sure, but what about the inverter actually? How steep is the cost curve still actually? How much potential is there still to get costs down?
Can't comment on that. I can't say much about the price with the inverters.
I tried
Sorry.
cost. Anyway, okay. So then let's look at maybe then the supply chain. So prices probably continue to, I think, even if it goes, we have this little blip up, but that won't go really back up in the long run, but rather down with the tendency. So, but how do we see actually the supply side of things? Of course, we already talked about that. We have huge overcapacities. What I see actually is, of course, that there's a tendency in China to go more towards new technologies. At SNEC, you could see a lot of tandem perovskites, but of course, that's still a couple of years away. Whatever people talk about, maybe 3, but probably also 5 or 6. And let's see. So I think there's still some quality and longevity issues to be solved. But what we're seeing obviously is actually now this tendency to back contact cells, so which nobody had on the agenda recently. People thought, oh, what is AECEA doing? And then LONGi jumped on it. And now you see all the other companies also getting into back contact. So there could be a momentum. And I think what's the reason? Probably they want to leave the tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 behind, because they also try to sell this high efficiency products into the utility scale market. So, but is this making the difference? So Frank, you said actually you expect overcapacity to continue sort of forever. But I think the companies also have only so much money to burn, right? And the IPOs happened a while ago.
Well, that's why innovation is king. So the money the companies are earning, they put it into innovation because that helps them to maintain an edge. I mean, to stay ahead of the pack. So the more money I can invest into R&D, the more it helps me to stay in business. And the beauty in China is that if I do come forward with like back contact or perovskite, for instance, and I have state-owned enterprises as a partner, so to say, they ensure they buy my output as a product. They put it into projects. I mean, I can monitor this project. That means I have field data, and these field data I can feed back into my design process or production process. So that means I do come with a market-ready product out earlier than anyone else. Such kind of let's say environment we don't have anywhere in the world except in China. That's a beauty for smaller players saying, all right, let's go for perovskite or back contact. And yes, Bangkok, LONGi, AECEA, they are following it through. Just this morning, I was reading about LONGi, a 50 gigawatt cell capacity they will have up and running by the end of this year. So yes, innovation is king for many of them, as well in order to stay in business, but as well for greater product diversification. Have you seen ones? You have seen all of them. But if you can promote, hey, I have this and this technology and I have this and this technology, so that sets me apart from the rest. eventually makes me more attractive. And maybe I'm betting on the right horse. And if you talk to equipment manufacturers, they don't, the largest amount of orders coming in is for upgrades, but not for necessarily new fabs. Yeah, so that is something else. So that's too is kind of a okay, maybe there's not much enough money around to invest in an entirely new technology-based fab. Yeah, rather keep what you have already, do an upgrade which is cheaper and still allows me to stay in business for, let's say, the next 12 or 18 months. Yeah, but no, innovation is tops everything.
Okay, stay on the supply side a little bit, Marius. So we of course have seen these regionalization also for energy security reasons in the different regions. Okay, I think India has been quite successful. Also, how they protected the markets, they are building that up. That somewhat works. The US tried, but of course, new government, new rules. And although manufacturing is not so hit so hard actually, but the demand side is, right? So on the one side, you said, of course, foreign investment are impacted. So that means there is an issue. There is some local companies that are also trying to set things up, have set up, are active actually also, and try to go upstream. How is this continue to happen? So how do we see what do we see in terms of diversification actually with the local intentions to kind of get somewhat more self-sustainable?
Yeah, I mean, we can definitely stick to the US here, I think. And if we're looking, starting with the Inflation Reduction Act and the Section 45X credits, like they were very lopsided for module assembly, and that's of course where we saw most of the build outs happen. Then you're starting to see domestic content requirements to get this adder on top of, let's say, for instance, the ITC or the PTC. And project costs in the US are really elevated compared to the rest of the world. If we're talking around $1.50 per watt AC, getting 10% added on top of that. So if you go for the ITC, you get 40%. So of course, everyone then wanted a cell plus module because suddenly that was enough to receive this domestic content adder. Now with the sort of the changes and it's getting more stringent, what you can actually deploy to get these ITCs and the PTCs, but they're also getting phased out, right? So it's difficult to say that there's going to be more demand for made in the US necessarily. Well, everything is going to be very strictly domestic content, but demand is going to suffer after the current pipeline of projects are being installed. But then again, when that happens, there might be a change in government. And that is one of the major issues with investing in the US on the manufacturing side. It's always a 4-year horizon, it feels like. So people are very hesitant to enter the US market. If we're talking about polysilicon, of course, the REC facility that's been sort of shutting down, starting up again, didn't really come through. And the only other project would be the Highland Materials one, not really looking to do either FBR or Siemens, but rather UMG Silicon. They did not opt in for the 45X credits, but rather the 48C, getting a direct payback on the total investment. So they will not really be impacted by, let's say, changes to the 45X and FIOC rules there, but they lack off-takers in the US market. So we have seen very little on the ingot and wafer side. The only thing that we really saw materialize would be the kerning one, which of course very tightly knitted together with Hemlock. And so they have now this entire value chain with offtake agreements for something made in the US from polysilicon all the way to modules. Whereas the Norsum project, which would then be the other potential US offtaker for polysilicon, seems to be delayed indefinitely, at least as of now. So it's at least getting delayed, and we'll see if it actually gets built out. Then the question becomes, what if they do the same thing that they did during the UFLPA? So essentially, you can't really procure Chinese polysilicon. So suddenly there was a market for US polysilicon going to Southeast Asia and then going into the modules and going to the US market again. That could still potentially happen with the new FIOC agreement. So we might be seeing some support for early value chain, but still it's all announcements on cell and module side in the US. And even them, they have slowed down over the last year.
Okay, thanks for that insight. So we are actually, so from the Taiyang side, we've teamed up with RE Plus and we'll do a half-day conference during RE Plus on the first day. Actually, we call it SolarMate in the USA, where we will look deeper into that topic. So let's see how that turns out. But so maybe quickly also to Frank Du. So how are you looking at this regionalization? You said you have two production plants actually outside China, one in Thailand, the other one in India. How are you looking at other markets? Actually, Europe, you have a big share in Europe, actually. So is there a need to do that with Marius mentioned NZIA, the Net Zero Industry Act, actually, which will also require for public procurement to source some local equipment you can choose. You can really cherry pick. You just have to have certain parts of the system being supplied locally, and that has also to be seen how that works out, because in the end it's the member states who have to turn that into laws. But how are you? What's your strategy at the moment regarding global expansion regarding manufacturing?
Thanks. Yes. So Sungrow, we operate also in US and other parts, and we definitely exploring the option, again, prepared for Europe specifically. It is less harsh compared to the US, where Marius earlier explained that the foreign entity of concern in Europe is not really to that level where if you are a Chinese company, we need to cut you off. However, we do see some of the trends from the EU Commissions as well as Solar Power Europe that more regulations, the sentiment of made in EU is growing, not for PV, but just in general for the wider EU markets. However, what we see is that it is more of a plus, like a good to have points when you are doing the, let's say, public tenders. For example, the Net Zero Industrial Act. It is part of the resilience that they want to impose to have made in EU, and they will give you extra point. They will encourage the member state to have extra points if you have certain percentages is higher. It's made in the EU. We are trying to pursue that way to help our customers to get those points. We definitely exploring the options, but in terms of urgencies, I can't really share too much. We definitely considering it. If that makes sense. But in terms of the stage, I can't really share at what stage we're doing this at the moment.
Okay, super. Yeah. Thanks. Let's go maybe to the last point quickly on the demand side of things. Wide field actually, so market will grow this year likely, but some regions rather not. In some region it does. So China might actually surprise us. It has already surprised us and continued to surprise us. But if we leave this year somewhat aside and rather really look towards the next years, we are seeing everywhere the same patterns, and it goes quickly because solar, we have this huge army actually that can deploy product very quickly anywhere on this planet almost if the gates open up. And so then everyone gets into this negative electricity prices, low capture rate issues, and what we're seeing that means, and that's actually on the high voltage level and also on the DSO level, so on the distribution grid level. So how quickly can we actually also get this thing done with batteries? And when you want everyone, please actually reflect once again on demand in the next 2-3 years on the global level, and take batteries into account, because theoretically the battery industry is also so big that if you say, for example, I live in Germany, the new government is discussing 20 gigawatts of new gas plants. Okay, the European Commission says that's not state aid compatible, so you have to probably do less. Nevertheless, they focus on that despite this Russia issue that we have. It's somewhat very difficult, this whole thing. But theoretically, if you would build instead of gas, which anyway will take many, many years because you cannot buy the turbines, the permits are difficult, you will get resistance from the locals and so on. If you would build instead of that 20 gigawatts of batteries, and then have that maybe in terms of, yeah, let's say 6 hour energy time, so that you really have, then you could solve that problem. So are governments seeing also from your research that batteries are the problem actually to bring and boost solar demand? So maybe once first, Marius.
Yeah, no, okay, I can kick off. I mean, well, I mean, the political mandate is gone. That's history. Yeah? However, the 15th five-year plan is in the making, and the National Energy Director is already indicated that it will very much focus on how to ensure that storage will be deployed in the years to come. Yeah, but in a more sophisticated way. Yeah, because the past 3-4 years it was kind of an X amount of megawatt or gigawatt. It has to have an X amount of storage next to each and every project. Was not entirely, let's say, sophisticated. Yeah, so now they want to be smarter. At the same time, the government is looking into air compressed storage with a slightly larger capacity, something between 300-350 megawatt hours. And right now, if I'm not mistaken, 6 of such kind of projects are under construction. I don't know, anywhere else as well. So, I mean, they are evaluating all the options. Yeah? And from a project developer's perspective, storage may experience a kind of renaissance because it will be economically driven, yeah, and not a trend, yeah, and not politically driven like the mandate China had the last couple of years, yeah. So I'm positive as well as far as storage is concerned in China on the ground. But for the time being, from just open the floodgates to now close the floodgates and open them again, but in more in a sophisticated manner and other technological options, that might be rather the way forward.
Okay, and so for the next half year, nevertheless, you're somewhat modest. So that means the market
for storage in particular.
Yeah, or in solar in China once again.
Yeah, no, yeah. You know, always past years I was always too conservative. Maybe it's my German nature, I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, no, this, you know, and early this year I was around maybe a 10% growth rate. Yeah, but looking at the 200 gigawatt by May and what is in the pipeline. Yeah, so yeah, no, I'm positive. Yeah, next year will be a different story. Yeah, so if next year we will see maybe a market contraction, let's say by 20 or 30%. Yeah, so that means would go down to just 200 gigawatt. Yeah, I mean, still the number is big. Yeah, I mean, bigger than anywhere else. Yeah, yeah. I mean, what about the production capacities and the output? Yeah, so that's rather my concern. Yeah, but who's supposed to absorb all this, even more the surplus of the product of the industry? Yeah, so that will be tough. But I'm sure at least by 2027, when things have more settled, regulatory changes have been fine-tuned and adjusted to the real on-site situation. Yeah, so I'm sure from 2027 onwards, demand will pick up again. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Marius.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're talking China and elsewhere in the world, storage adoption is going to be driven by market conditions. That's basically how it is. You see it in the US. If you look into the interconnection queues themselves, almost everything that is solar is tied with storage. You're seeing the same trend in Europe. Any new builds tend to be solar and storage. Even in Europe, with existing standalone solar PV systems,
most owners, they actually pay the balancing authorities fees, so they don't have to take the risk on the balancing costs, because you're very much in the danger of having to pay enormous sums, and you're not really making any money off of the merchant market. So you need storage to make money off of the merchant market, but you also need storage to be able to sort of not be subject to these really steep balancing fees that you do see throughout some hours of the day. I mean, it's going to be the same in the US, in Europe. You see it in Australia, and once at every single solar project, not every single, but a majority of them will be then going merchant in China, at least if they do get built out merchant, they do need storage. It's not because it's mandated, but because they're going to need it for project economics. So that's kind of where we're standing on storage, where we are a bit more bullish than on solar compared to our peers.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Here, Frank, do maybe finally, so you showed actually that over a quarter of last year's inverter deployments came from you globally. And so when I just do the math, and then of course you're also a big storage supplier. So when you look at the market, so what do you see as the three major challenges actually to kind of really deploy as much as you would like to? So what needs to be fixed?
For PV or for storage?
Maybe for both, right? Even if
Okay. For PV, I think I explained there were challenges specifically for different regions are different. So for US, it's the uncertainty about their policies and also tariffs that will sort of interrupt their supply chains. And China is a different story. I think Frank has explained a lot. For Europe specifically, you do have the queue. That's I constantly repeating that, and the permitting issues, and also the viability of business cases. I would say I will echo what Marius said. You need to have for both, yes, PV and energy storage, and especially energy storage. You really need to have a solid business case for the investors to actually moving forward. Because even today, we still have many countries in even EU27. We're not talking about pan Europe. EU27, you still have many countries that still have the double taxations when you feed into the grid and in taking out. As a consumer, they will charge you twice with a grid fee. Not saying it's a wrong thing to do, but it's when you're calculating those, you really need to be very careful with the business case. And some markets, they don't have capacity markets neither. So there are certain developments that we need to see within the region to make sure that the financial, the cash flow is good for the investors. And another thing that for energy storage, I would say is the clear policies that we see that is still not in place. Because if today is, I would say, past few years, we start seeing more and more countries that take energy storage seriously and start doing having some sort of a policy regulation that's mentioned energy storage. But if you see the 2023 and 2024 when they submit their national the energy and climate plans for every single member state, most of the time, I think there's only 5 states that actually did anything to energy storage. So it was not a hot topic at that time. It is most recent. So we need to have a much stronger support from each member states on the ground to support the energy storage in terms of auctions and again money. And yeah, I would say that's the most important thing that we need to see in Europe specifically.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yesterday at this conference that I was at, the storage conference, grid connection was mentioned by many as the biggest hurdle.
Every day.
Products, and we still have that also, of course, for solar. So in any case, I think if I hear you, Frank, so although we are getting cheaper and more competitive on the solar and the storage front, it's in the end, of course, still policymakers we need. Energy markets are as key market or key topic for every nation, actually always very much policy dependent, and there things have to change. And yeah, so we'll see what will happen there. But nevertheless, it's great to have talked to you. I think my takeaway is also the market continues to grow. I think the industry is not, or the manufacturing industry is not doing well, but trying to do its best in these times, and innovating as much as they can to bring things to the next level. So thanks a lot. That was very helpful. We will also publish a report on this at our website. The video will be recording will be also available on our website on YouTube. So thanks a lot, Frank, and Marius, and everyone. Have a nice day and a nice evening. Thanks so much. Just one mention. So our next webinar will be on distributed and smart solar. So as we learned today, a lot is going towards large-scale installations, while in many markets of the world, especially the residential market has been rather suffering post-energy crisis in Europe, and also post net metering, or after the new net metering rules were implemented in California and so on in the US. So we try to look into that, and also into the business models, how to combine solar with other technologies like heat pumps, simply electrifying the household. And that's the theme of that next webinar. Thanks a lot, and for everyone, and have a nice day and evening. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Michael, cheers. Huh?